while, there was a growing optimism towards EVs. In the mainstream media, many outlets appeared less hostile towards EVs than they once were. Politicians who at one point were vehemently opposed to electric vehicles seemed like they might, just maybe, welcome them at last. At least, as long as they meant good things for their career and their district. And automakers who had once come out in hives at the sheer mention of replacing suck, squeeze, bang, blow with a thrust of electromagnetism appeared to finally get on board with electric vehicles. Granted, many of them were doing so because of political mandates relating to zero-emission futures, but it was better than what we'd seen previously. In the last few months, however, that's changed dramatically. Automakers started to backtrack on their lofty EV promises of just a few years earlier. News outlets that had managed to sound reasonably impartial on EVs slipped back into vicious hit pieces, decrying EVs as being antithetical to common sense, financial stability, and yes, sometimes even our very own way of life. And our comments section has become increasingly unpleasant as well, with nary a day going by when there's not at least a few dozen people spewing misinformation and hate based on myths that we debunked a very long time ago. And I think I speak for all of us at the channel when I say it's a frustrating time to be an EV journalist. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere right now. Although we have considered and are still considering the possibility of perhaps shifting part-time to doing consulting work and paid production work locally in Portland rather than doing YouTube full-time. Because, you know, we have bills to pay, but we're also not ready to give up on EVs anytime soon. So for those who would rather we weren't here, sorry, you're stuck with us for the time being. Of course, the last few months haven't all been doom and gloom. Data from the US government seems to suggest that switching from an end-of-year tax credit for new EVs to a point-of-sale tax credit for new and used EVs is encouraging a more diverse group of people to get behind the wheel of an EV. And tougher limits around the world on who can exactly apply for purchase incentives and what those purchase incentives can be spent on is certainly a step in the right direction. But we're starting to see another story pop up more and more. Stories of automakers either pushing back their commitments to go all electric by a previously set date, or tales of automakers who now say they're going to introduce plug-in hybrids to their lineups to help people with the transition to electric. And at the heart of this all is fears about profitability of electric vehicles, i.e. how much money an automaker will make, or rather lose, on every new EV they make. So today we're going to delve into all of that and ask if automakers are to blame for poor choices in their market goals for EVs, because, as I'm about to detail, I think they are. Before I get too far into today's video, I want to acknowledge that there's a big piece of misinformation flying around about electric vehicles that I feel needs addressing. And it's the one that says that EV sales are dropping and that nobody wants to buy an EV anymore. But this year, an estimated 17 million EVs will be sold globally, up from 14 million last year. So why is this narrative so prevalent? In a nutshell, EV sales growth is slowing, but EV sales are still growing. These are two different things. I think of the first as the rate of acceleration of sales, while the second is the number of sales in a given period. The latter can still grow if the first is slowing, but as long as the first remains positive, EV sales will continue to grow. Basically, analysts and automakers alike miscalculated what EV demand would be and how quickly that demand would ramp up. Demand is still strong, it's just not accelerating at the rate that we and others would like, but it's still accelerating. That off my chest, let's now look at how we think automakers are getting EVs wrong. Part of the slowdown in growth is caused by automakers focusing on the wrong things, failing to make the kind of cars that regular buyers want. So I'm going to start with covering some misconceptions about vehicle development and business figures, and then I'll cut to my thoughts on how EVs can be changed to benefit regular buyers and automakers as well. Let's start this all by talking about development costs and Ford's Q1 financials for the year, which detailed, among other things, that while its electric vehicle division, known as Model E, raked in $100 million in net revenue during the first quarter, its high expenses led it to lose $1.3 billion in the quarter. And that's led people to calculate that Ford is losing $130,000 on every EV made for the US market. A calculation that frankly makes some pretty vague assumptions and hand waves away a bunch of stuff. So again, let's look at those details. For what it's worth, Ford blamed the drop in revenue from Model E on margin cutting. Basically, it offered some pretty large discounts during Q1 to keep its prices competitive and to encourage people to get behind the wheel. And hello, disclaimer, I benefited from those discounts when I purchased my replacement Ford F-150 Lightning. And while Ford's EV division was suffering, the rest of Ford's vehicle businesses, Pro and Blue, did just fine, making a decent profit for every car sold. But Ford's other divisions rely on older, more established technology that's had a longer time to pay dividends on the investments made in it. This takes time. Back in the 1990s, spurred by the demonstrations of hybrid vehicle technology at US auto shows, Toyota and Honda poured a massive amount of money into hybrid vehicle development out of fear of losing out to their US rivals. While those same US automakers ultimately decided against making hybrids, Honda and Toyota pushed ahead, debuting their first hybrid cars to the world just before the turn of the century. It gave them bragging rights and a healthy head start on the competition that some would rightly argue they still have on hybrid engines today. But what's not often discussed is the fact that it took Toyota nearly 15 years to see its investment pay dividends. It lost money on every single first and second generation Toyota Prius it made, and it was only after the introduction of the third generation Toyota Prius in 2009, it was a 2010 model year car, that it started to make anything like a profit. And in the EV world, I think we've also forgotten that Tesla, long considered the leader in EVs by many, took an age to reach long-term profitability. It nearly folded multiple times in its early days because of those crippling costs associated with being an automotive startup and developing new models. At this point, a very valid question would be, yeah, but legacy automakers are making a killing on internal combustion engine cars. Why don't they just plough that profit into EVs? The answer is long and complicated, but it's worth noting that many automakers now have separate EV divisions, as does Ford, in an attempt to try and isolate their money-making part of the company from the bits that aren't yet making money, i.e., EVs. And this was done because automakers know it's going to take a decade or more before they are truly making serious bank on new EVs, and well, if something were to go wrong with the EV side of the business, isolating it can, in some cases, protect the rest of the business while simultaneously opening up the potential to operate like a traditional startup, gaining funding from outside sources, and sometimes even floating on the stock market. And this approach keeps shareholders happy and old-fashioned sorts who can't see the benefit of EVs. Sadly, there are still way too many people who fit into that last category. And despite what you might hear from a politician on the campaign trail or some news outlets, it's not a downside of EVs, it's a downside of product development. New technologies take a lot of money to develop, and unlike combustion engines, which most automakers have more than a century of knowledge of developing, EVs are, for the most part, new for the majority of legacy automakers. Yes, they may have developed EVs in the past, but the level of development and the rate of change increases the pressure to keep up with rivals and increases the spending required to make competitive vehicles. And there's a fair amount of chance involved in the EV world. Some companies seem to be more capable of attracting backing and financing than others. Fiskars' financial woes are caused by a myriad of things, but in that list was ultimately funding issues. Lucid, meanwhile, remains in a reasonably stable position at the time of filming because it's been able to secure a huge amount of funding from the Saudi PIF, among other sources. But enough on investment and business operations. Why are automakers finding making money on EVs so hard, especially legacy brands? I think those brands bear a lot of the blame. Of course, there are the obvious ones. Why make money on something new and expensive when you continue to make money on the same stuff you've been hawking for years? Environment be damned, and I will admit, there's a fair amount of that happening. And there's the old chestnut too of people don't want EVs, which can often be deconstructed to we, automakers, tell people what they want through advertising, and then they, customers, tell us what they want, which becomes a paradox in which nobody willingly takes the blame. Next on my little list is automakers and buyers and their little weird expectations of EVs, which sadly are also influenced by that aforementioned paradoxical advertising circle, as well as what other companies are doing. Let's call it the looking over one's shoulder phenomenon, the let's see what they're doing issue, and in the EV world, the other in this statement is Tesla. Its vehicles are the ones everyone tries to copy and or beat, vehicles which, for the most part, sit towards the higher end of the market, think BMW. And I think that has helped encourage automakers to develop ever larger vehicles with ever larger battery packs, heavier curb weights, and consequentially more expensive sticker prices. And while we've seen incredible leaps in battery pack and powertrain in the last decade, most of the positive effects of advances being made have been negated through increasing size and weight. Before you get cross, I know that early first-generation cars like the Nissan Leaf weren't exactly a panacea of awesomeness, although I'm still very sad that one of the most efficient EVs of its generation, the BMW i3, could have led BMW to a lighter, more efficient future had everyone embraced it fully. Instead, more expensive repair costs for BMW's innovative i3 and i8 led it to ditching carbon fibre reinforced plastics and returning to more traditional construction materials, which left both cars, along with their impressive efficiency, basically in the history books. This creep in weight and size means we aren't seeing a world where small EVs are becoming increasingly efficient thanks to improvements in battery cell chemistry, energy density, and powertrain improvements. We're missing out on a future where fun, small, funky hatchbacks appropriately sized for the majority of people who live in urban areas are available around the world. Instead, these vehicles, awesome as they are relegated to a few select markets where small cars are still king. But in doing so, mainstream legacy automakers and some EV-only brands as well are essentially requiring us to mine and refine more raw materials for every new EV we build. And while I know not everyone wants a hatchback or a wagon or a sedan, it's also true that not everyone wants a crossover. In fact, we are told that regularly, both in the comments section, when we talk to you at events, and when we talk to consulting clients. Large electric crossovers with massive range and equally massive hoods are, sadly, a symptom of the industry not paying attention to good charging infrastructure and the auto industry not working with legislators to prepare for appropriate charging infrastructure. Larger battery packs are essentially a crutch for that problem, even if the majority of people never do more than 30 or 40 miles a day. Even those who do more usually could cope with a basic overnight charge, if only they had access to it. The next issue is down to the pretty scrappy way in which automakers are currently chasing the next big thing. While it's fair to say that EV tech has come along in leaps and bounds in the last decade, just compare an early Tesla Model S to the current vehicles rolling off Tesla's production line, But the majority of automakers aren't sticking with a platform or a design long enough to benefit fully from the economies of scale that come from that development process. Engines, yeah, the suck, squeeze, bang, blow things, have production lives that extend to several decades. They are tweaked over that time for sure, but they stick around long enough that automakers have been able to leverage long production runs to squeeze every ounce of usefulness out of those engines. Battery packs and motors have traditionally not had that luxury. And of course, it's important to keep innovating, but automakers haven't really yet figured out how to deal with the disparity between the fast iterating world of battery cell chemistries and in-car tech with traditional automotive 8 to 10-year development lifespans. EV tech is evolving so quickly we don't benefit from economies of scale, and we don't benefit from established third-party parts availability. And look, one of the reasons why early Nissan Leafs are so beloved by right repair advocates in the EV world is because Nissan has basically kept the Nissan Leaf very similar in under-hood tech from its very first model to its current iteration. Sure, the design has changed a little and battery packs and motors and power inverters have been tweaked, but not so dramatically that you can't just simply fit parts from newer Leafs to keep older ones running. By contrast, our Chevrolet Bolt, which was made during its first year of production, is now approaching its 7th birthday, and as a model is no longer made in any form. GM has moved to a completely different battery platform, vehicle platform, and vehicle type. Its second-generation Chevrolet Volt had an even shorter production run, with just 2 and a bit years of production before it was scrapped. Contrast that with my old Volvo 240, which was produced in the last year of the vehicle's production run. A production run which lasted nearly 20 years. To be clear, I'm not advocating that automakers keep the same battery packs and drivetrains in their vehicles for 20 years, but at least give vehicles a long enough production run to keep up body panels and non-drivetrain components and to make them easily replaceable and lower cost. And sure, change the battery packs and the drivetrains as better versions come along. Just make sure it's not just a massive generational change that is completely incompatible, as we just then can't keep those vehicles running. Keeping vehicles well supported and repairable well into their second decade of life is essential if we want to reduce the carbon footprints associated with EVs, because that's where the majority of carbon emissions from EVs come from, their manufacturing. While naysayers will claim that EV battery packs won't last that long, the latest battery packs being made do promise longer life. CATL, a Chinese company known for its prowess in the battery industry, recently launched a bus battery pack with a, wait for it, 1.5 million kilometre 15-year battery warranty. I also want to bring up the matter of platforms and the constant switching between them. Right now, there's frankly only one automaker I can think of with a truly versatile, dependable EV platform. It's Hyundai Kia. The eGMP platform developed by that company is hands down the most versatile and well-designed platform being used in the industry today. And that fact is borne out by the reality that it underpins such a wide variety of vehicles. Sure, Volkswagen's MEB platform is okay, but eGMP is next level. It combines high voltage fast charging with a range of different battery packs and powertrain configurations, and it underpins the overwhelming majority of the Hyundai, Genesis, and Kia portfolios of EVs. One platform to rule them all means lower costs, it means more profits. And there's a certain reason why Hyundai and Kia are currently doing so well in sales, and it's not just because you can buy an all-electric sedan and moderately sized hatchback that both companies want us to call a crossover. Next in my list, tech. Automakers need to ditch the tech, or at least offer it as an optional extra on higher level trims. As many of you tell me in the comments and in person at events, the majority of you don't want fancy bells and whistles in your car because your car is a tool to get you from point A to point B. Most people just want a way to connect their mobile phone and a way to ensure that they can stay safe behind the wheel. Neither of those require expensive computer screens, self-driving capabilities that don't really work, or 10 different ways to adjust your seat. In fact, as I noted last week when I drove the Silverado EV WT for the first time, perfunctory vehicles are sorely missed in the marketplace right now. Ditch the tech, focus on the thing that most people want, which is reliability and a decent, not massive, EV range. Finally, to the big elephant in the room. Affordability. I'm seeing a lot of new EVs coming to market that are targeted at Gen X and older owners with enough disposable income to actually put down enough money on the EV to be able to afford it. I'm frankly one of those. But I wasn't when I was younger. Buying a new EV for $30,000 was very much out of the question when I was in my 20s. Buying a new EV that was closer to $20,000? It wouldn't have been impossible. Difficult, but not impossible. I recently attended a virtual Cadillac press briefing where it was revealed the car being debuted was going to be targeted at millennials. It was a car with a starting price that was well out of reach of the majority of millennials I know. And sure, it was a Cadillac, a brand not exactly known for its affordability, but other mainstream brands are also having similar issues with their pricing structure. And look, it's great to have aspirations, and it's great to see aspirational cars reach the market. But at the same time, when most people under the age of 40 are struggling to find rent payment that they need to keep their home, they want transportation that's more affordable and approachable. And EVs are lower cost to own, they're cheaper to fuel, as long as they come with a lower price tag. Mercifully, Ford, and it's starting to look like other automakers, are starting to hear that loudly and strongly. Ford has said it's shifting its focus towards more affordable, smaller EVs instead of the mid and full-size EVs that it's been making. I personally welcome a return to more affordable, smaller and more practical EVs rather than what we have today, which is basically a load of overpriced luxury vehicles. But there's also that promise of plug-in hybrids and hybrids, but that is for another video. One that Kate has already made, in fact. Link in the down below. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than the 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just over $10 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters. Look, it's Moose, Dom, Stefan Benty, Tom G. Richardson, Benjamin Ford, Indigo, and Kem. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, address also below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store, also linked below. This month, we are celebrating a new amazing t-shirt design by our in-house artist and animator, Erin. Get yours today by heading to our Redbubble store. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.